So great, so we're just getting started. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Feel free to let us know where you're watching from in the chat while people file on in the room. So thanks for joining us. Okay. Great, and yeah, Jill and Mary Colleen, feel free to can introduce yourselves.
And we're glad everyone's joining us. We'll get started in a couple minutes. The neighborhood dogs are also welcoming you to this webinar. So we'll keep that going. We're talking about addressing student learning loss today, and wealth of experience with us with Mary Colleen Covington. We'll introduce ourselves more formally once everyone comes in, but we've had the pleasure of working together and going to the same Catholic elementary school as each other. And it's fun to bring on people we know and trust onto the webinars and podcasts and all those things at NCAA, because there's so much good happening in Catholic schools.
Welcome, everyone.
Yeah, we'll get started in a couple minutes. I'm going to mute myself and let these dogs settle down. And we just want to tell people too, if you have any questions during the session, you can submit those in the Q&A box. We're also going to use the chat. So you have great ideas, you can share them with each other in the chat box too. You're not jeopardizing the chat box, so keep that going. And then if you are interested in a certificate of attendance for today's webinar, please complete the post-webinar survey, and which will be shared at a number of points during and after the webinar, along with the slides. So you'll have all those materials after the fact too, and you'll also get a recording of the webinar. Okay, I think we're ready to go. We are talking about addressing student learning loss, and everyone wants all the answers. They want the magical solution. But I think a lot of what we're going to talk about is just reminding teachers of all those good things already happening in their classrooms. I'm going to introduce myself because I'm relatively new to NCEA, and I want to make sure that you all have a chance to get to know me so I can get to know you. I come with experience as a teacher, over 10 years of teaching, middle school, high school, math and language arts were my areas. And then I was assistant superintendent for a number of years in the Diocese of Grand Rapids. I oversaw all the curriculum and instruction and assessments and technology. I also grew up in our Catholic schools, and my kids are in Catholic schools, so I am all in, and so is our co-presenter today, Mary Colleen Covington.
Hello, as she said, for those of you who are on early, we went to the same Catholic elementary school, so I have been in the Catholic schools since 3-year-old preschool. I took some time to teach in the public schools after college in various states that some of you may even be from. I then, when I was having a young family, the Catholic schools just were calling me back, and I actually taught at Jill's in my former elementary school before then becoming a literacy specialist at Corpus Christi in Holland, Michigan, where I have a present kindergartner and 3-year-old preschooler who come to school with me. So I'm also an active Catholic school parent as well.
We want you to introduce yourself in the chat box. That way we know where you're from and what your role is. I know we have teachers with us, we have RTI specialists, we have administrators, and it's great for us to know who you are. So please do that. And while you're doing that or thinking about what you're going to say, let's also begin in prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear Lord, thank you for our ministry of Catholic education. Thank you for all those who are on this call, all of our teachers, all of our administrators, who are doing the work, Lord. We are doing your work according to your will, and please guide all of us. Help us to calm our anxieties in a difficult school year. Help to calm all of our nerves as we try our best to reach the needs of every student in our classrooms. I know there's been sleepless nights among our teachers to try to do this well, and Lord, please calm all of that. We will prioritize our work according to your will, and please send the Holy Spirit upon us so that we can do that well. We ask this in your name, amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Thank you again for introducing yourself in the chat box. We love seeing that. We're gonna get started. Now, we know that we are not the experts of all things. We never claim to be. We are teachers teaching teachers, and you also teach each other. So we are going to use the chat box once everyone's introduced themselves in there. If you get good ideas while we're talking, if you have a better idea than what we're saying, just put it in there. You're not going to offend anyone by sharing what you know or what you've done and what you've accomplished. If you need something specific, you can direct message the panelists, and we can support you with that as well. And we're also going to do some polls. So we need to keep you engaged that way, and that way we understand our audience. There's gonna be plenty of people watching this as a recording, so just wanna recognize that and thank those who watch this later. Okay, here's our scenario for the day, because if we just open the can of worms, we could stretch this to all kinds of topics. So we're gonna pretend this scenario because this is where our examples came from. And we also had 2 superintendents reach out to the NCAA to say, here's our scenario. Can you please help our teachers address learning loss? They are overwhelmed. So here's how we're going to frame our day, knowing that this is not the exact scenario of everyone's classrooms. So we know in this scenario that this is a K-8 teacher. I know we have high school teachers on this call. That's fantastic. I was a high school teacher. But for our scenario, we're going to talk elementary because we can all understand the examples. Who is experiencing unpredicted gaps in their students, and unpredictable because it's different students than they had thought would have gaps, or there's certain skill gaps and not other gaps, just more of these gaps creeping up in their data. And they feel, and this is the talk as you talk with your colleagues down the hallway or in the teacher's lounge, or when you get a second together, where you just feel like more students are behind than usual. It's just that overwhelming feeling people are having this year. And this teacher knows this through formal and informal data collection. And the demographics of the school we're going to use is this particular school gets to have mostly in-person instruction, although this classroom has been out because of close contacts and back in, and they have some students out all the time. And so all of that hybrid is happening, but that they are in the building, in the school building, as much as they can be. We're talking about a school size that's about 1 classroom per grade level. They have no extra supports in this scenario. So Mary Colleen Covington does not exist. They do not have an RTI specialist. They have no inclusion director. They have no classroom aides. And this year they don't even have their volunteers because grandparents can't come in to read. They don't have college student or high schoolers coming in to tutor. Because we know that's a lot of your reality too. They also, this is important in this scenario, they have a principal who gets it, which means a lot of things, right? And they have great colleagues and they have people who want to do good work. But our scenario is going to be all about what can the teacher do in their role, because we know a lot of good happens there. So that's what we're going to focus on, a teacher in a teacher's classroom doing core instruction. Okay, so here's the big problem of practice. Before we get there, I'm going to give you a quick poll. I want to know how much you know about RTI, response to intervention, ranging from I've never heard of RTI to my school uses RTI. And there's no wrong answer here. And it's good to see in the chat box some familiar people, some faces and names I know, and some new friends. So thank you. From here on out, we've now had this joint experience, which I love. It's good to see the answers to the poll. So now we kind of see the range, and we knew it was going to be a range. We have participants in all 4 of these categories, which is great. No prior knowledge necessary. We are not going to teach you all things about RTI in this moment. But let's think about this problem in practice now. So the big question is, how might this teacher meet the needs of her current students without having resources to bring in? No more people can come in and help her. Again, we're talking about unpredictable gaps, students feel behind, and there's some data to support this. Mary Colleen, do you want to talk to them about what you want in the chat? We're going to add something to the chat now.
Absolutely. So since we just really want to be here for you guys this year more than ever, we wanted to use this as kind of a data collection for ourselves. So in case we were to be able to offer some more of these as follow-up sessions in the future, if you could just write, what is your biggest challenge you're facing this year?
Great, and we'll let those come in while we're talking. So what are your biggest challenges, whether your scenario is like this scenario, teacher, or not? So the biggest challenge you're having, why you came to this webinar, addressing student learning loss. All right, it's all you. Let's talk about RTI.
So as Jill mentioned, we could do a whole session, just a whole year really, just establishing RTI in each of your schools. So in order to just kind of fill in a basic understanding for those of you who are unfamiliar, and to kind of reaffirm those of you who are familiar, I'm just going to do a brief overview just so that when we're talking about what this could look like in your classrooms, that you just have basic understanding. And so let's really focus. Yes, there's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. But the words I really want you to focus on are the words all, some, and few. And I really like this infographic, and I use this when I work with my teachers because it's a gradient. So a lot of times when you see an RTI triangle, you're going to see like solid lines, which I think makes it seem really divided. Whereas I like this because it shows that it's fluid, because students are going to bounce throughout it depending on your lesson. If you have an RTI interventionist, very likely they've classified these students as one of these 3 things, especially if you have somebody like me seeing them. They might say, I'm seeing your tier 3 students. A lot of times that's determined based on bigger data collections, such as an NWA MAP score. But what we're going to talk about is really thinking about this from your day-to-day in your lessons, that you're going to have students falling in each of these categories. And so, like I said, tier 1 is going to be your whole group. Okay, everybody's going to get tier 1 instruction every day. That's your core instruction. Tier 2, think of it as these are your kids that are going to need a little side-by-side check-in. They might need manipulatives present when they're working through a math problem. In reading, this might look like having leveled books. I know a lot of curriculums come with leveled books so that you've got your core kind of grade level books, but then you also have some that are just below grade level, and then of course some that are even more below grade level. That would be your tier 3. In writing, it might be they need graphic organizers in order to get started on writing. They aren't able to just start on their journal from scratch. So as I say, really focus on the words all. Everybody's getting that core instruction. Some, they might need a little bit of extra assistance, and then a few, that red zone, are going to be your students who need the small group pull out, not necessarily from me, but also from you. And we're going to kind of break that through in this specific scenario.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, you could be an expert in RTI and you get all this. But I've also seen very effective teachers who, by their gut instinct, do this type of teaching all the time. You look at the sea of your classroom and they all need this. Some of them need something a little bit more, and individual students need a lot, because they're out of the range of your core instruction for some reason. And it's specific by skill too. I want to also recognize John Hattie did a meta-analysis of the most effective practices associated with student learning. And I just want to recognize that this topic, the red, is that response to intervention is highly effective. The effect size is strong, RTI works, but I also want to draw attention to the top 2 things that he says. One is a teacher's estimates of achievement. So how closely you can estimate where your students are achieving and not achieving. So in other words, how well you are analyzing your formal or informal data based on what students know is the top thing you can do for your students. And then right below that is collective teacher efficacy. How effective do you feel? Oh my goodness, no one feels effective this year. Look, no one does. And so collectively, so building wide, how effective does you and your colleagues feel this year is huge, which is terrifying because no one feels effective. But I think by reflecting in sessions like this one, just thinking through your practice is going to help you feel more effective. Like, I got this. Like, Mary, Colleen, and Jill didn't say anything new. I already know this. Bingo. Like, this is how you'll feel more effective. Okay, so I want to recognize, and I saw it in the chat box, this is huge in the chat box right now. It is overwhelming to read all of your answers. Nothing in here is surprising me because it's the same conversations we're having nationwide in Catholic schools and public schools and charter schools and all schools, but specific to Catholic schools because we see this as ministry. We are called to this ministry, and we deeply care about our parish and school communities, and we deeply care about the children in front of us, and we have relationships with them for 8 or 9 years if it's a K-8 building, and that's huge. And this is why none of you are sleeping at night. And I want to recognize for you that in all the teachers that I've worked with in my role, all the classrooms I visited this school year, and all the teachers I've talked to and superintendents I've talked to, I want you to know, this is qualitative, not quantitative, but the most effective, confident teachers are the ones who are struggling the most this year because you have felt very effective. You have your practice in store. You don't feel like a first-year teacher. You're probably a third or fourth or beyond teacher, or you've been teaching for 30 or 40 years and you know what effective teaching feels like, and this year does not feel that way. And so I just want to recognize that extra weight that you are carrying on yourself, and the expectations right now are different. They just are for a number of reasons. As a Catholic school mom, I'm just glad that my kids are in school and I don't care what anyone teaches them, which is strange because I have my hands in on all of that curriculum and instruction. But this is a great year to take risks. Take risks to challenge your assumptions about student learning and to be innovative, because not doing those things is also a choice. Trying to teach this year like you taught last year isn't going to work, and that's also a decision that you're making. So this is the year to take a risk because everyone will give you grace on it, and trying something new or trying something different with your instruction, this is the year to do it. So again, how is this teacher going to meet the needs of her current students? Okay, so we know this works by focusing on one skill at a time. So I'm gonna turn it back over if you want to explain to us what we're looking at here.
So as Jill mentioned, we're kind of picking this scenario to focus on today because we really wanted that sum, all, and few to really be solidified through a specific experience. We're trusting you to be really innovative, imaginative educators. And if this second grade classroom example doesn't quite fit what you're teaching, we're hoping that you're able to at least see what took place in this classroom and be able to imagine, okay, this is how I can stretch what I'm doing to meet the needs of all my learners. And if you ever want to bounce ideas off, you have my email from the first slide, and I'd love to do that because coaching is my favorite part of my job. So this second grade classroom, I, because of COVID times, recently acted as, the second grade teacher at our school. And I got to teach them 2-digit addition day 2, right after their teacher had introduced the standard algorithm before she had to be out for a couple of weeks. So when I was looking at their work from the day, which was a standard, second grade math curriculum worksheet, I could see a range of where we were at, right? And I knew there was going to be a range. Being the RTI specialist, I was aware that there was a wide range of skill level in that class, as there is in any classroom. But we had kiddos who, were flying through the algorithm. We had kiddos who were really struggling with not adding across. So like in the 50 example, they were adding 5 plus 0 because they weren't used to their numbers being stacked. We had kids who weren't computing accurately. So by giving this assessment, and which is just, your basic worksheet, nothing formal, I was able to start to see, okay, we've got some gaps here, and we're going to need to address these the next day when I was going to be teaching them. So this is a practice that Jill and I also did when we were middle school English teachers. You really can do this, across the board. So although we're focusing on the second grade example, this is something that we've done, in secondary and elementary. This is just a great way to kind of see what are my students going to need the next day. So I took that assessment, that basic standard math curriculum worksheet that they had done, and I put them into piles. I put them into tier 1 pile, the ones who are going to need the core. They were going to need the mini lesson the next day, just like everybody else. But they weren't going to bump down into that tier 2 group because they were going to be good to go with our activity and not need too much support from me. I had my tier 2 students. They were going to need some support, such as having access to manipulatives, some side-by-side check-ins. And then I had my tier 3. Those are the students who are a little bit more alarming of like, oh, they really don't understand basic addition still, which these are gaps. These first graders were home for 3 months last year. As first graders are home for 3 months last year. Those gaps are going to be there. And so really kind of touching base with them in a small group to refocus on their basic addition skills. And then there was also students who needed to be challenged. And I noticed a couple of you in the chat box were saying that you're feeling like, just as much as you're feeling like there's gaps to fill, there's kids, like there's a particular kid who's my friend's son in this class. She's a teacher. She was home with him in the spring. He's coming in better than ever, right? Because he had one-on-one time with his mom, who was really like, she got one of those butterfly houses for them, to watch the butterfly hatch. She really owned her homeschool experience. And so he's coming in needing more of a challenge. Mm-hmm. So once you have your assessments sorted.
Yep, and I want to jump in and talk about sorting these assessments. So I'm going to go back a slide actually so we can look at it for a moment. Oh, let me see. Because the same thing happened in middle school language arts when I was teaching that. You get the giant stack of papers to grade. It's the final draft of papers, but what you're really starting to notice is their grammar mistakes. And so instead of marking every little grammar mistake, I would think about one skill at a time. So even though it had nothing, this narrative, whatever it was, had nothing to do with apostrophes, I would narrow in on apostrophes as I was reading the papers. And I would start realizing, okay, core instruction, they understood the general rules about apostrophes. And then you have some kids who are just struggling with plural possessive. So I would just start jotting down their names. Who's struggling with just plural possessive, and I would put them there. And then you have the kids who are putting apostrophes everywhere because you did a couple mini lessons on apostrophes, and research shows after you teach a skill, they'll do it more often than not. So especially when you introduce a semicolon. So you introduce a semicolon, then kids are like, sweet, I've never seen this before. And suddenly there's semicolons on every line. Like that is true. And that means their brain is growing and it's good. So you're going to see more mistakes before you see less mistakes. Anyhow, so you kind of have that list going. I'm creating all these narratives. I have kids who have no problem with apostrophes. I have a handful who have trouble with plural possessives. And then I have some who are like completely out to lunch. They need some reteaching, right? And those are few compared to the others. But once you go back to school the next day with that short list, you're not just passing out the narratives with a grade on it. You are then constructing your classroom. And I think that's where we're going to get. And you'd see the same. So everyone look at this math for a minute. So just do some mental math. I want you to just think about it yourself if you did it. Because you also have to anticipate what are some things that they're going to do and how will you know ahead of time what they're going to be. When I look at this, I see that I'm noticing that they don't have to carry from the 1s to the 10s and any of them except the bottom middle. I don't know if you noticed anything else, Mary Colleen. We didn't really practice this part. I was just thinking like, if we did the math, they're going to be able to follow us onto the next steps. But that's what drew me in. We know that in mental math, we can move left to right. So I could go left to right and do these problems correctly, except for the bottom middle one. The bottom middle one's going to throw me trouble if I don't know how to carry my one, or if I am going left to right instead of right to left. So you got to start anticipating that. You all do that when you are figuring out what to give your students. But anyhow, I want to talk about that a little bit before we moved on. Is that okay?
That's great. And in this particular lesson, they were expected to carry the majority of the time. Jill and I were just trying to find a small enough snapshot to put onto here. To put their whole worksheet would have been a little bit challenging. And I didn't have access to it anymore. So yes, carrying, just so you have that in your mind, carrying was definitely a part of it. So you've now got your pile sorted. Now, some of you might already have these things in place, but if you don't, we really wanted to get you thinking. Do you have an environment where you can meet with small groups? When I was an elementary teacher, this kidney table, this little blue table, was a standard piece of furniture in my classroom. I have one right behind me. But when I taught middle school, it wasn't in my room. We were all about the tables on wheels because it was progressive, right? And so then I had to really rethink my classroom and how can I meet with small groups. And now in COVID times, what I used to do, you can't do anymore, because I used to kick kids out of their table and say, you're going to go read to self, find a cozy place on the floor. I'm taking over your table so I can meet with small groups. Or they would trade seats, right? So that I could take over one of their tables to my small group table while they were rotating through doing centers. Yes, centers, even at the middle school level. But that doesn't work this year. So you really have to think, is it a matter of bringing in a new table into your classroom and wiping it down each time like I do? Would your school expect you to have plexiglass dividers up? Because I know there's those. If you're teaching virtually, it's almost a little bit not easier, because I know getting them online is half the challenge, but you can set up a separate Zoom time. That's your small group, right? So first thing to think about is environment. You need to be meeting with this small group, that tier 3 pile for sure, maybe even some of those tier 2 kids, depending on how you want to approach the skills that they're lacking. How are you going to address the apostrophe issue? How are you going to address some of the issues we brought up with 2-digit addition, and what space are you going to use? So that's kind of the first thing we wanted you to think through is, what is your environment like, especially with COVID limitations? And are you going to be able to do this? I was thinking, if I was in my 5th grade classroom still, and I didn't have a kidney table or any separate space. I mean, my desk was tiny, right? Because everything's get out there and you're up and moving with the kids, right? Like a lot of your schools are probably following that trend. I would probably have them sit as socially distanced as we could in front of my whiteboard on the floor, with me either standing at the whiteboard or on the floor with them, depending on how I was teaching them. So,
and we recognize that those rules and those regulations are different state to state, district to district, diocese to diocese. But we all need to think about, what are the decisions we can make that think about the whole classroom structure, whether virtual or in person, about the environment. And you learned a lot over time. How you taught back last March and April is much different than how you're teaching now, and how you launched the school year in August or September. This is coming in phases. And I saw it with my own children too in class, that last spring, they were all on the same Google Meet together. And that's not working when you're kindergartners, right? So in the fall, trying to stagger those and knowing that those groupings are not static, right? That with every skill set, you can give your kids different times to meet, or you can break that down a little differently as long as you stay organized. So pulling them onto meets with 2 or 3 classmates is way different than a classroom of 30 in kindergarten. You all learned that and you have progressed there. I know you have. But what other environment strategies can you use, and expectations? If you have ideas, throw that in the chat box. Like, it's easy to say, this is impossible, I can't use the kidney table. What have you done? Because you've all done it, and this collective knowledge is very powerful. So how have you still worked with smaller groups and individual students right now, whether online or in your classroom? We'll just let those ideas come in while we keep talking.
So the second thing that you need to think about are your expectations. I know it's really easy to stick with the curriculum, right? Because I've done it before. We did that worksheet on Monday. I have my Tuesday worksheet ready to go. It's either a quick tear out of their notebook, or maybe you've already made the copies. But if you've got significant gaps and you know that the worksheet's going to be really tough to meet those gaps, plus you've got the kids that need to be challenged and the worksheet really isn't going to rise to the occasion for them, you really want to think about your expectations for the lesson and the activity and how you can adjust it to make it attainable for everyone. And so I've got this one very specific example, but the thing I love about it is it's something I've taught before. It's something that I have a teaching partner who's our math specialist. She's a big believer in it and is coaching teachers at our school on how to put this in place. And maybe some of you have even heard of it. So it's called counting collections.
I'm going to cut you off and just say, I was going to say something really quick. So I am math teacher by trade, middle school, high school. And yet last spring with my elementary children at home, the teacher's saying, like, find a handful of these things or a handful of those things. And I'm like, what? And until we were preparing for this webinar, did I realize that this was counting collection. And I should have known better, but I had no idea. So I'm really excited by this example because I think even our high school folks can think about how does this apply to the type of work, and think again, we're thinking about this framework of what do all the students need? So the common thing is that you're counting stuff, right? That's very broad, but what do some students need? What do individual students need within that framework? And the kids think they're all doing the same thing, but they're not. Sorry, go ahead. I'm really excited.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you were able to kind of vouch for it a little bit. So counting collections, as you say, we're going to be sharing these slides with you, so you'll be able to access these resources. I strongly recommend watching the videos, especially if you're within a couple grade bands of those grades, because they're just amazing to watch with, especially with the kindergarten one. Like, it's mind blowing what these kindergartners are doing when they're counting collections, as I'm sure Jill witnessed with their own kindergarten from last year. So you can do dividing with it, all sorts of things. They'll be broken down on the website. But I'm going to focus on how I used it with this 2-digit addition example. So day 2, right? Day 3 of learning the algorithm. I have them sit down and, oh wait, sorry. First, I'm telling you just a quick little bit about counting collections. So as Jill said, you're literally counting a group of objects. We have a counting collections library in my classroom right here that's accessible to the school. If you're in person, this is great. You can set up, I know my team teacher has a sign out with the date so that teachers know when the collections were used, so that for sanitation purposes, they know if it's been quarantined long enough. If you're at home or if you're teaching virtually, as Jill mentioned, her son, had to go and find objects around his house. You can have your students do that with something as simple as cereal, dried beans, something that hopefully all of your students have access to. I know my team teacher, she's used this both virtually in the spring and virtually with the same 2nd grade group this year. She sent them out looking for rocks if you didn't have cereal in your house, because we teach a demographic that doesn't always have it. So I just wanted to show you, she literally just got containers from our local food service. It's called Gordon Foods. For those of you familiar with it, in other states, you probably have something similar. They actually donated these for us, but if not, they're pennies a piece. So really basic organization. And then the other thing I want to show you is she does label them by set A through D, with D being the larger set and A being sets less than 20. And that's important to point out because it makes being able to, I guess, differentiate like I did on that day really easy, because you're able to seamlessly kind of pass out the objects to the kids at the level that they need it. And so we're just going to watch really quick just so you can see this in action. We're going to literally watch under 2 minutes of one of these videos just so you can see kind of the way the teacher talked through the strategies with the kids and what counting collections look like. Typically, you're going to have them start by counting them into groups. In this particular case, these kids chose to count them into groups of 10.
If you're counting by 50s.
Can you hear or no?
How are you guys grouping yours?
Maybe a little louder.
You have to be able to work well with your partner to be successful at counting collections. You have to be able to agree on a way to count. I saw 2 of my girls, they had green cards and they had purple cards. So they shared the responsibility. One girl would count the purple cards and another student would count the green cards. Is that a group of 10? And then what do you have? 2 leftovers. So what should we do with these 2?
She has 8 and this is 2, so 8 plus 2 is 10.
Wow. So what could we do with this 8 plus 2? It's 10. What could we?
We can put them together.
Okay, where is the 8?
Yeah.
Is that your group of 8? What should we do with these, Sarah?
We should do that when we should count the 10s, and then we should make these 2 last. Wherever number we land on, we're gonna count by ones.
Okay, so you're different strategies, but both of them are correct. So I'm gonna let you guys decide which one you're gonna do. All right, awesome. So I would say just keep these out of the way so you'll know. And then go ahead and count your cards.
20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100.
students are understanding how not only to count, but they're also learning how to record and how to add their collection.
Okay, now draw.
So as you can see, it's a really great tool for building number sense. And in this particular second grade group that I was working with, be it the kid that was adding across, right, was adding 5 plus 0 and 50, or kids were really thinking of 5 and 50 as 5, not as 5 tens or 50. The great thing about counting collections is I was able to address the needs for number sense through the activity. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll kind of go through. So all of them needed to continue to learn the algorithm. That's our tier 1. Everybody needs the algorithm still. Some of them need number sense support through manipulatives. Counting collections gives them access to that. A few of them need side-by-side review of basic addition. If you watch the kindergarten one, especially, like, it's amazing how busy these kids are when they're doing this, right? Like, they're completely engrossed. So this gives you time to be walking around with your clipboard or whatever it is you're using to collect data or to offer support. Because everybody's so busy, you can be sitting side by side. And trust me, this second grade class that has 3 ASD kids in it, they're very, very busy, like just energy-wise busy. And so when they can be so engrossed in activity that the teacher is able to float around and work one-on-one with the students who need it, it is awesome. And counting collections is something that that group just responds to so well. And then
can I jump in for a second? Like,
yeah.
I just want to recognize too that, of course, the example we give is pre-COVID, right? But this is still possible in your classrooms in this scenario. They're not sharing, and their numbers.
There's no partner counting.
Each other is not happening, right? They're not passing cards to each other. Like, we recognize that. But how can you replicate that? And we know that that is how students are using things like Seesaw and Flipgrid and other video, like, so that students can think out loud with their number collection. Like, show me your number collection through a 30-second video is something that even our kindergartners can do. And so how are they still having that conversation? And how are we, as we're thinking about all, some, and few, how is that going to be different? Our instruction, our little video back to those kids are like, oh yeah, but what happens to those tens? What happens to those tens when you have 10 of the tens? And what does that mean? You know, and so how we are pushing them in small groups and individually and as a whole can still happen, even if they are working in their bubble. Or working at home. And so we recognize that. And that's the hard part. And that's where we want more and more ideas to come in the chat box. Even if it seems little, even if it's a little win, go and throw that in the chat box because someone else might want to grab that.
Absolutely. And then finally, there's that few that needed the challenge beyond core instruction. And so go to the next slide and I'll show in a little more detail how that happens. So we first had we do math workshop in there. So we first did our mini lesson reviewing the algorithm. I use this great tool called DigiBlocks. We're going to be doing a Jamboard at the end of the session, and I did link to DigiBlocks if you're not familiar with them. Basically, think of them. Oh my gosh, I keep forgetting I'm like in my classroom. I will go and grab some when Jill takes over a slide so that you can see them up close because they're amazing. But basically, think of a base 10 block that you can break apart. They come in a huge block of 1,000. You can break the 1,000 into strips of 100. You can break the 100 into tens. You can break the tens into ones. You can actually even get decimal blocks for those of you teaching decimals that they break into obviously tenths and such like that. So I did a mini lesson with DigiBlocks to really show them how they were carrying their tens when they were making a new 10. Because it was great that we could literally build the ones into the 10 and show that we're carrying it over. And then we added all our tens together. And that also kind of kept everything vertical for the kiddos that needed a reminder that that's how the algorithm was working. All of them then got a counting collections set. Like I said, they're labeled. And so, sorry, I'm just seeing the inexpensive ways. If I were to show you this counting collection, so these are actually all donated by families. I saw somebody just mentioning that manipulatives get expensive, which DigiBlocks, absolutely. We are a very low income Catholic school. We get a lot of grant support. We use our title dollars appropriately is a weird way to say it, but like we use them in what we see value in. So in the last couple of years, we've been slowly building up, getting one-to-one, having enough DigiBlocks for each classroom. posted real quick. We can talk more about that in the Q&A. But yeah, these kind of collections can be cheap. This is literally somebody donates bingo chips. These are excess beads that somebody had. There's noodles over there. I collected acorns when I was on a walk with my kids. Dry them out first, otherwise they get moldy. But yeah, so these kind of collections are another reason why I picked this is because yes, it's something they have at home, and yes, it's something that you can build up very inexpensively at your school. So anyway, I'm able to give them their set. This is an example of a set D. So this was going to the kid that needed the challenge. Set A was going to my kiddo, a few of them who needed numbers less than 20, a set C or set D, or sorry, a set B or set C was going to the kids for kind of at that tier 1, just kind of needed the basic 2-digit addition support, ready to go with the algorithm. We're getting in that range of 50, like 30 to 50 to 60, up to 99. So, and then there was a few of them given the numbers over 100 because they were ready to go for 3-digit addition. But yeah, once again, like trying to emphasize that everybody looks like they're more or less doing the same thing when they look around the room, because we want it to feel like everybody's getting tier 1, which they were. So that tier 1, everybody was going to count their collection and then add it to a neighbor's, okay? And that meant different things depending on the group. And I went and I checked in with them. So I had them sit by somebody with the same letter on their container, okay? So that way my 2 set D guys that were ready for the 3-digit addition were close to each other. My 2 that are tier 3 students that come for interventions, but also were showing that they needed addition support, they were close together so that it was easy for me to meet with them. They were still counting, socially distanced with their masks on. But they were close enough so that when I went to check in with them, I could check in with them together. And then we could literally combine their collections so that they were having that manipulative support of putting their collections together, seeing how they were making a new 10, similar to the girls in the video, and doing the carrying. And then the few of them that were kind of in the middle, it depended on the kid. That's where having that information from the day before, I knew who was ready to just say over to the neighbor, hey, could you tell me your total when you get it? And then they're just adding on their paper. Or there's a couple of them who I said, how about you put this together just to cross-check it? Like you say it all casual like that, but then I'm watching them put their 10s, and if I notice on their paper, like the algorithm was a little bit off, they're then seeing, oh, look at this new 10 I made. I'm carrying it now. Now I'm seeing where I went wrong with my math, and it was a way to check. And then for those of you that were talking about wanting to meet the needs of the kids who need to be challenged, what I had one of the students do is, because of course he was done in minutes, right? Like he counted his collection over 100 and faster than I could have. He had already added to his neighbors and he was ready to keep going. Meanwhile, I needed him to be busy so I could keep working with the kids who were tier 3 and tier 2. What I said to him is, I wonder if you could find the total of everybody's collection. So he wasn't combining his with everybody's. He was going around asking for the number with a clipboard, doing the math, and then going around and checking. And so that's just, I wanted to throw that in there. So you could see there are ways, this one activity, everybody felt like they're doing the same thing, but he was able to be met with a challenge as well. And I know in non-COVID times, you can have kids swap collections, that kind of thing, have another collection ready to go for them to count if you're able to build up a big enough library. But for this particular day, since the focus was 2-digit addition, I didn't need them to count another collection in order to meet that need.
Right.
What I did for kids who also finished early is I had them just add to another neighbor, say like, take your number and add it to another neighbor now.
Yeah, and in digital collections too. So think about if you have that video library then in Seesaw or in Flipgrid or whatever platform you're using, where you then can watch each other so that you know what's right to go next for those students, and they can hear each other's thinking and push them the next time they pull out collections. We know that happens. I also want to talk about this whole, like, in the sea of the classroom, as you're looking out and hearing the buzz, whether it's on your screen or in a live classroom, the same thing happens when you see like an AP government class. They're all writing. So it's like a writing workshop model in AP government because they have to be writing so much to be ready for the AP test. But even though they're all writing to the same prompt, you are individually coaching students based on what you know is their knowledge. You know, you have students who watch the news every night and they're watching news feeds and they're reading deeply and they know history, the History Channel, they know everything. You're pushing them to add more detail and do more things, while other students need to just narrow down their claim so that they have some structure to their essay writing. So you are doing this and how you're intentionally telling advice to a few kids. I mean, coaches do this all the time when they're watching a sports scenario, like you pull over the few kids who need to see that skill again. Like coaches do this all the time. And so how do we do that in our classrooms is the biggest feat, right? Like we all know that we can't hand them all the same project or the same worksheet and get the same thing from them. They all need to grow. And so how to organize that has been really tricky this year. So just want to keep talking about that. All right, good to move on. Next slide. We know that the most good is going to happen in that core instruction, that no Mary Colleen can solve all the problems. We've all had moments where we just say, those kids need to be pulled out. They need this X, Y, and Z before they can learn this from me. We all have those moments, whether we've said it or just thought it. But there is overwhelming research to support that that is not the best thing for those students, because when they are pulled out of your classroom, they are missing what's happening. They're missing hearing the voices of their classmates and you, and they're missing core instruction for that pull-out instruction to some degree, however that's constructed. There's appropriate times for that, but that's why it's tier 3 and beyond. Like that's why it's not just common practice that students are pulled out all day for things, because the most good can happen by you orchestrating the dance. Like the thing that you do all day is the most effective thing. And that is by keeping them all there. It looks like they're all doing the same thing to some degree, even your 12th graders, but you are pushing them individually based on expectations and environment. What else on that one, Mary Colleen? I kind of took over. I get really excited by this.
No, I think you hit it beautifully. I mean, I just recently sent out data reports from assessment, mid-year assessments I just gave on kids. And the first thing I say is, look what you're doing to the teacher, right? Because we're seeing this great growth with kids because the teacher is the one seeing them all day long, right? Like, so I really try to celebrate, in our case, all hers, right? Like I really try to celebrate her as the first one, you know, on the front lines working with these kids. So just know, those of you out there, you are doing amazing things, and the data, I promise, will come around and show it. If you're not seeing it yet, it will, I promise.
Good. I want to throw you the next poll. So we are going to talk about ideas. So this is you promising to yourself. Doesn't matter to us how you answer this, but we are wondering, what specific idea might you implement tomorrow? Nothing you learned today was new information, and we're not done teaching you stuff. We have more to go, but nothing was necessarily brand new. But what promise can you give to yourself? Are you going to identify new gaps? Are you going to try to sort your work differently? And this might be a re-promise to yourself. You've done these things before. What did this remind you to try? And there were 5 options. And we'll just leave that open for a few minutes. It is overwhelming to think, everyone is behind. And we know that that is how you're feeling. But when you look at a specific skill, it doesn't feel so overwhelming. You might get that whole stack of papers or that whole stack of exams and think, none of them got it. And it was because, and then it's because you never got to that unit that you normally would have done by now. And you're putting that pressure on yourself. But if you identify the specific skill or content, I think that's helping people along the way. Okay, so that was your promise to yourself, is how you answered there. We appreciate you taking the poll. We're going to talk about some bigger things then too. So this is like the, what can I do tomorrow? Promise to yourself. What are you going to try tomorrow or next week in your instruction? And then, I'll show you the results too. So here's how people answered. And I think that that's important for us to see. And then we're going to talk about some bigger things that you can do. So we know we have a book for you. So this is Response to Intervention, a blueprint for Catholic schools. RTI is not new to Catholic education. This book is not new. It was actually published in 2010. It still applies. So one thing you could do is pick it up. It's in our store, but you can Google it and find it. But this is also a book that you want to read alongside with your administrators, so you can think about how can our school approach RTI. So we have that available to you. We also have recently, including today we dropped a podcast episode on this. Renaissance Learning showed their true COVID slide data on students nationwide, non-public schools. And then also go back a month on December 10th, we dropped an episode, NWA showed their COVID slide data. And it might echo your classroom data, it might not, but those are good episodes for you to hear. And Mary Colleen is going to do a follow-up at our convention. So we all love going to NCAA Convention. It usually brings us to a new city in the country, and we all get to collaborate by the thousands. We have to do that again virtually, but we have a great program. Actually, tomorrow is the deadline for proposing sessions. Mary Colleen's session will be in the lineup, and she's going to talk about how to use observational notes to guide tier 2 interventions specifically. So that small group work or what some students need. She's going to talk about observational notes. You can register for convention with that link, and you can register your whole school too. And it's Title IIA eligible at 75% of the registration fee. Okay. Oh, final poll before we do this. Final poll. Let's see. Got to find it. Final question, call to action. What do you need to do from here? Are you going to learn more about RTI? Are you going to read the book? Are you going to go to her session? Are you going to talk to a colleague? Are you going to continue small strategies to improve your practice because you were on the right track and this was a good reminder? Your promise to yourself. What do you need next to learn about RTI or to implement strategies in your classroom? All right, as we get those in, Mary Colleen, do you want to talk about the Jamboard?
Yeah, so as we were kind of thinking about this, we really wanted this to feel like it fit everyone, right? And it's hard because we really wanted to pick a specific scenario at the same time so that what we were saying with the all, some, and few was really pinpointed so you could see what it looked like in a specific classroom. And so in order to make sure everybody hopefully gets something out of this that feels like it fits what you teach, we thought we could do that through Jamboard. And so as this session ends, this is something that you can access throughout the evening, even if you are feeling like you're ready to go. This is just a space for you. I try to create a page that hopefully fits all of you who are here. Administrators, maybe not so much, but basically just sharing, you're the experts, right? You are the ones that really know what's been working well for you this year. And I'm sure everybody, even though it's a struggle of a year, has something they can celebrate about themselves. So this is just a space for you to put sticky notes with resources. So for example, I put this one here. This is one of my favorite resources for early literacy, especially if you're noticing phonemic awareness gaps. That's if you've got kiddos who are struggling to slide through sounds, like in a word cat, if they're going at, but then they can't say cat, they're maybe saying tack. Or if they can't rhyme, phonemic awareness might be the culprit. I know most of you early literacy teachers out there are like, well, yeah. If you aren't familiar with Haggerty, he's somebody I love. I put the link to DigiBlocks here. For those of you that stick around for question and answer, I can go and grab them too, so you can see them. They're literally right behind me, unless she has them rented out to another class right now, since we're still building up our one-to-one collection of them. But yeah, so if you have something that's gone well for you this year, a resource, an idea for a lesson, an idea for something like counting collections in your content area and your grade level that you were able to keep everybody occupied so that you could go out and meet with those that needed it, please put those resources up because we'd love to see it.
And if you've never played with Jamboard, you can't break it. So this is a great chance for you to try Jamboard if you haven't done it with your students. You can see me kind of playing with the arrows at the top. You have different pages. We've had principals on Jamboards and superintendent on Jamboards and students on Jamboards. A lot of times students like to show their work this way. So this is also a good resource. It's within your G Suite if you use Google, and it saves them all just like it would save a Google Doc. You can access this after this webinar at any time into the future as you share ideas on here. You can insert pictures, you can insert handwritten work if you're on an iPad or something, but it all kind of works like sticky notes, and you can move them around, you can move other people's. This is a shared space, so it's like having a bulletin board in your classroom where you're sharing ideas, or anyone can walk by and move one. Same is true on a Jamboard, and it's a good resource. So you can't break ours. You can go ahead and go in there and add stuff and play with it, even if it seems silly. Just put a sample sticky note on there if you've never used it. But this is a good way for us to collaborate beyond this time together. In the chat box also, you're going to see a link to the virtual convention, just if you want to know more about that coming up in April. And if you need anything else, please reach out. Mary Colleen, what else you got for us?
I was just going to say, if number one, if you feel like you don't meet one of these pages, feel free to make a new page, because we want you to feel like you're able to share resources on a page that fits you, because maybe other people are like you in this session. It's hard making this not knowing who all is coming. Real quick plug for DigiBlock. So this is your 10, okay? Those of you who haven't seen, I have not been this excited about a math thing in a long time. I wish I had it when I taught first, second, third grade. So if you go to their website, you can literally see a kindergartner doing long division, not even knowing she's doing long division. Just the way they talk through it. And so of course I nerdily had my kindergartner do the same scenario, and she did it and it was mind blowing. So literally you've got your 10s that obviously break into 1s, and they fit into the 100. I didn't bring the 1,000 over, but just so you can kind of have a sense. Then obviously 10 of these would fill the 100. It has a cap. 10 of the 100s fills the 1,000. And so just a real quick little plug for DigiBlocks. So I think it's hard to kind of visualize them until you see them, but there you go, base 10 blocks that come apart. Are we still doing questions or?
Yep, if there are questions, you can stay on and ask them. If you are good to go, then you can, we thank you for your time, and you're in my prayers. By all means, all teachers are in a special place in our hearts as parents and as fellow educators. So how do you get to the Jamboard? There is a link. There was a link in the chat box. I can put it in there again to the Jamboard, and I'll put it there and just put it in there again. There are a lot of people had it open. There's like 15 people in it. That's what I love about Google. You can see who has it open. And link to the convention. I will put that on there again too. And I'm also going to put your survey in there again too, especially if you want a certificate of attendance. And we'll stay on if you have questions just for a couple minutes.
Thank you to all of you who came. As we mentioned earlier, please feel free to use our emails too. If you ever have questions or ever want to throw ideas, I love, as I say, coaching is my favorite part. I love brainstorming with other teachers. It's my favorite part of my job.
Classrooms. Mary Colleen, I cannot wait to be able to, go out and visit the schools everywhere and see classrooms. And every day I miss teaching. So, but God calls us to roles that are not what we had in mind. And here we are. And now we just get to hang out with good teachers instead. Okay, thanks. We're not seeing any specific questions. We're going to let everyone go and have a great day.
Are we staying on or are we